My name is John Greenewald, and I run theblackvault.com. So I started theblackvault.com when I was 15, just simply because I was looking for a website that had government documents and had information that was verifiable, at least in the sense that the government gave it to you and it was official. And back when I started, when I was 15, it was 1996. And it didn't exist. There was no website at the time that really had anything. There were a couple pages here and there, but no actual archive. So I did two things. I started firing off Freedom of Information Act requests to the government, started trying to get every document that I can get my hands on. But in the same time frame, I'm taking those and putting them online. And I actually started originally hand typing in documents. Because I couldn't afford a scanner. And at the time, scanners were fairly expensive, and they were flatbeds with no feeder. Literally the first 400 pages of the archive, I literally typed in by hand and made a legend that would talk about what was blacked out and redacted. And that way there were little codes to kind of figure out what was what. And then in time, it just grew into an archive of over 1.8 million pages online today, and it's been quite a wild ride. The basic fundamental of the Freedom of Information Act is fairly straightforward. If you want something, you ask for it, and you should get it. However, the wild card are 9 different exemptions that if the information that you're requesting, whether it be the form of a document or a video or a photograph, which you can all legally request under the Freedom of Information Act, if it falls into one of those 9 categories, it's blacked out, redacted, or not released at all. So the basic process, very simple. But once you dive into it, then there's a lot of challenges to come along the way. Got to figure out where to go, who to go to, what to ask for. There's a lot of tricks where if you ask for too specific of a topic, if you're too specific in the request, you could shoot yourself in the foot, and then they come back and they say, no, we've got nothing on it. But you were too specific. You maybe had a word wrong, a letter, a number, something that was off, and that gives them the out. So there's a lot of games that you got to learn how to play, and the other thing is you got to learn a lot of patience, because sometimes it takes quite a long time to get records and to get documents. My record is over 14 and a half years to actually get a record. So I mean, really think about how long 14 and a half, that's a decade and a half of waiting. So I request it, and a decade and a half goes by before I actually get it. That's ridiculous. And I did an article one time on that situation that talked about what happened on the planet in that time frame while I was waiting for that one document to come. It was less about the document, more about what the heck really happened, during that time frame, because it is such a long time. But that's what you have to do sometimes with the Freedom of Information Act, is you just have to wait. What's really interesting about the Roswell incident is the United States government hasn't explained it once. They haven't explained it twice. They haven't explained it 3 times. They've actually tried to explain this thing 4 different times. And explanation number 4, the most recent, when you really dive deep into the information that they try and make you believe, it is so blatantly false. I mean, not like kind of or maybe. I mean, it is in your face, completely false, where they have wrong dates, things don't match up, the information is not accurate, and you're supposed to just dismiss every witness that has come forward, and there's quite a few of them. You're supposed to dismiss all that and take this for gospel. It doesn't make sense. So the government and military tries so hard to make you believe something, but all you have to do is question it, and you look at the evidence, and it can't be true. So whatever happened at Roswell, I don't know, alien or not, I'm not real sure. But all I can say is that the government has tried to explain it, and they keep failing each and every time. What I think Project Blue Book was supposed to be was a true investigation into the UFO phenomena. During the late 40s, we knew that the phenomena was real. Why? Because people were seeing them all over the place. Roswell happened in that year. We knew that there was something that needed investigation. So they started these different programs, Project Sign, Project Grudge. It all ultimately became Project Blue Book. What it was supposed to be, and what the government wants you to believe, is that this was a true investigation. Over the course of about 12 years, they investigated 12,000 plus sightings. Very few, a handful, only 701 remained unidentified. But they believed that the only reason it remained unidentified was a lack of evidence. But in short, they felt that they could explain everything. And that's what they want you to believe about Blue Book. But yet again, when you look at the actual evidence and you start dissecting exactly what they did and Where did the actual good cases go? And there's evidence that the good cases never even made it to Project Blue Book. It was funneled through to a different area or a different agency. We're not incredibly sure. But those are all official declassified documents, right? And so the government will give you the evidence that you need freely. We just have to sit down and look at it. So what they say usually is the complete opposite of what the evidence actually says. At the end of 2017, something very interesting happened in the UFO field, wherein somebody came forward, somebody from the inside. He had retired, but he came forward to talk about a project that he headed investigating essentially UFOs. It was called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, or AATIP, of what they call it. And what he said was the government was involved in UFO investigation. Now, I'd come out with a ton of documents, so that in itself wasn't too surprising for me personally, but I was surprised at the magnitude of the response by it. I mean, this was like global news all around the world. Headlines were flying that the Pentagon had this secret UFO study. I don't know exactly where we're going to be in the next year. You know, I mean, with anything nowadays, there's a lot of controversy with anything. Especially with this, though, there's a lot of unanswered questions. I'm a bit of a skeptic on it. I want to be wrong being skeptical about it, but I am skeptical about kind of the context of these videos that have come to light, and I'm afraid that it's not exactly what we're led to believe. So I've done a lot of research on it. I've filed a lot of FOIA requests. Some have come back, and not with good results. Others are still out. So it's a very evolving, very morphing time in ufology, because again, now we have this project that we know, but we just don't know the extent of it. And the red flags that have popped up for me as a researcher and an investigator, ones that I feel need to be addressed, they're ignoring those, and we're not getting kind of the addressing that we need to really kind of answer some of these questions. So it's an awesome story. It's amazing. I think it's a big revelation no matter what, but at the end of the day, how big is it? And that's the biggest question for me that I can't answer. It's encouraging in the sense that the military was or is taking UFOs seriously again here in the 21st century. That's really the first time they've openly admitted that they are taking it seriously. So now the question is the project still ongoing? One side says yes, the other side says no. So it's like, who do we believe? I have tons of examples to show the government lies through their teeth. So it wouldn't surprise me if they, are lying in this case too. But then I look at motive on why, and it doesn't make sense on why they actually would lie about certain aspects to AATIP. I also found quite a few documents that really support, and this ties into the Bigelow Aerospace thing. I went through a lot of commercial aviation manuals by the FAA and found proof that really when Bigelow Aerospace went into these manuals, because he did get himself listed in manuals to have people and pilots report UFOs to him, and these were all official manuals. Around the time frame that AATIP started, Bigelow Aerospace made sure that the terms in these manuals were Bigelow Aerospace and not a former defunct company that Bigelow used to own. Around the time AATIP allegedly ended, Bigelow Aerospace disappeared from the manuals. So I believe that kind of furthers the documented proof that AATIP was probably canceled around 2012. But then you have this other side, this government insider that's come out and said, no, we continued it and found the money and this and that. I hope that that's true. It doesn't make sense to me, and that's where a lot of my red flags come in on whether or not that is 100% accurate or not. It's encouraging that I think that the government will take these reports seriously again, because they should. And I think that it is documented not only in recent years, but for decades and decades, it's documented that this is a threat, right? Whether alien or not doesn't matter. There is a phenomena out there that is not only seen by civilians, but seen by military and government personnel, seen by pilots, police officers, very highly credible and accredited people, educated on what they see in the sky, and yet they are seeing a phenomena they can't explain. So I hope one day that either if the military did cancel it, that they start it again, or I hope I'm wrong with my reservations to believe it's still ongoing, and that they are taking it seriously, because the proof is there that this is a threat. That doesn't mean that aliens are going to attack us, but whatever this phenomena is on the surface is a threat. And we have to figure out exactly what it is to figure out what we're going to do with it. And that's a big, big unanswered question. The biggest recommendation, and I'm going to do a shameless plug, but it does support what I say in that the official documentation tells such an amazing story. And I'm not saying, hey, come look at, theblackvault.com, look at me, yay me. That's not where I'm going with it. But for me, the official documentation is where I would start. And the reason I say that is because they tell such an amazing story. They might deny it, but that denial is a piece of the evidence to show that they're lying. For a long time, I tried to stay away from the L word. I never wanted to accuse the government of lying. And, I was not only fearful, but my father, who has the same exact name I do, was working for a government contractor who was working on the space shuttle. So I was always treading very carefully about accusing the government of lying. But by definition, that is exactly what they're doing. And it's only their own documents that I use to prove it. But be that as it may, those denials and all of that frustration and those documents that give me a denial where I believe there shouldn't be, all of that is a piece of the puzzle. So for me, and this is a personal recommendation, I stick with the official stuff first. Because then as you branch out from that, it makes a lot of these other stories that you hear at UFO conferences and that you read on the internet a little bit more believable. Doesn't mean they're truth, but it makes them a little bit more believable because you have such a strong core. If you start with these, crazy stories, and I'm not saying all abduction stories are crazy, but I mean, in that realm, there are a lot of crazy stories, a lot of which are from verified hoaxers and so on. So if you start there, you don't have a very strong base. And so when you start there and then you kind of look at the official stuff, you realize, well, that doesn't mean anything. That's not really important. So that, again, is just my own personal thing. You intellectually, when you research this thing, start with that strong base, the stuff that you can't refute, the stuff that no skeptic can attack me on for saying anything of what I do in a public speech or lecture. I welcome the skeptics. Bring it on. You got a response to something that I said or the proof that I have the government is lying, bring it. Let's debate. I'll sit down. I got no problem. And the reason is I can prove everything that I say. So you start with that strong base first, branch out from there, and then you can start building on it and see what works for you intellectually, and figure out what you believe in, because you're going to dismiss a lot to the tune of 90+% of what you read or hear. I would probably guess that a lot of people will just dismiss it, whether it be it's just not believable or it doesn't fit into what you're looking for or your interests, or it's just plain crazy, because there's a lot of that too. A lot of that's going to go out the window, but you start with that base and branch out. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a lot of great information at your disposal.